Hey guys, Katrina back with another video. This is going to be part 6 to my life. I'm going to try to go through this as quick as I can, try to cover a little bit of ground. Um, After the trial, both my parents went to prison. I didn't understand why. I didn't see my mom as someone who hurt me. I seen her as my dad's victim as well. It I remember playing outside in the yard, and my grandmother kept telling me, "Oh, it won't be long till your mom will be home. It won't be long till your mom will be home." And granted, I haven't lived with my mom now for 3 years. And all I could think was how great it would be to just have my mom without my dad around. And my aunt drove up in her car, and I thought it was my mom. So I went running to the car, and it was my aunt. And then she told me that my mom would be coming with my uncle. So my uncle got there, and I noticed that my mom wasn't in the truck. And I asked my uncle, where was my mom? And he said, well, she couldn't come yet. She had to stay there for some stuff. And that we needed to have a seat because we needed to talk. At this time, I really put my mom's family on this pedestal, this very high pedestal. I thought they were perfect and that they would never hurt me. That they would never, and maybe they never did consciously. But there was a lot of unconscious actions that they did that just really hurt me. When my aunt said she's coming with your uncle, that was a lie. I didn't know my mom's family was capable of lying. Whenever my uncle started talking to us, my grandmother was listening, and you could just tell something in her broke at that point. She didn't understand why her daughter was going to prison, why she was beat and abused so terribly by this man, and yet she's going down with him. With the anger that she had, she started taking it out on my brother. And since basically my testimony was what saved her from doing a lot of hard time, I was like the prize, I guess. Basically, the tables turned between me and my brother, and I was favored and he wasn't anymore. She would constantly refer to my brother by my dad's name. She would like get into these fits and just start hitting him for whatever reason, eating too fast, eating too slow, walking too fast, walking too slow. Like there was nothing that he could do that was right. And she would just start smacking him. And then she would tell him, "Get out of my face, you look just like Steve Graham." And she started calling him by my dad's name, and she said that he just looked too much like him, that he was his seed, which I mean he was, but it wasn't his fault. He was a little boy. So during this time, seeing this stuff happen to my brother, I felt happy at first because I got to basically rub it all in my brother's face. You're not the favorite anymore. I'm the one that gets to do what you got to do with my dad. And it was funny or fun or enjoyable for the first couple weeks, maybe month. After that, whenever she would start going after him, it would do something inside of me. I don't know, like it made me either want to hit her or run away. I didn't want to hurt my grandmother, and I didn't know if I was capable of it. Whenever my mom called, I talked to my mom about it, and I told her I tried to tell her the way that my brother was being treated. And she told me just to talk to my grandmother. She said to tell her that I didn't like it, that it made me feel bad, that just tell her that I needed her to stop. So I tried having this little conversation with her, and it didn't work out so great. um, During this time, a lot of her family had been around and noticed that there was a big difference made between me and my brother. So they were a lot nicer to my brother than they were me. The problem was is that after I told my grandmother I didn't like the way she was treating my brother, I wasn't the favored one anymore. She was nice to me in public, but as soon as it was behind closed doors, she wasn't as mean as she was to my brother, but she was still pretty vicious. And her daughters and her sons didn't know that. So they would still like overly be overly nice to my brother, and yet I would get told I had to sit down, that I couldn't play, or that there was, I don't know, like if there was one of something, he got it. And I didn't understand, I had put them on such a high pedestal. I didn't understand, why they were making such a difference between us. Before these people, whenever we were around them, there wasn't a difference made. It was like they loved us equally. And I thought that if we could stay around them, then we would both be loved equally, instead of being like with my dad, where my brother was loved more than I was, or with my grandmother, where at first I was loved more than he was. But I guess they felt bad for the way that their mom was acting towards my brother, and they just wanted to make it right, I guess, in their eyes. But what it ended up doing was hurting me, because now not only I wasn't loved by my dad, or I didn't feel like I was loved by my dad. I no longer felt like I was loved by my grandmother. And then all of her daughters and sons basically acted the same way she did. Like, they tolerated me. They didn't want me, but they tolerated me. It started making me have a lot of anger towards them and feel very unloved by everyone around me. And I constantly wondered, why was I brought into this world for this? What was the point in this? Why do I have to keep going through this? Why, no matter where I turn, I see people just like my dad? People that aren't supposed to be anything like him act so much like him. Why? How is that even possible? Whenever I told my grandmother I didn't like the way that she was treating my brother, she felt like I was taking it from my dad somehow. I remember her telling me that if I was going to take up for him, then I must be just like him. I didn't know why I couldn't be more like my brother and just not care as much what was going on around me or the way people were being treated, why I felt like it was my burden to take on. A few nights I ended up in the emergency room with panic attacks. At night I wouldn't be able to go to sleep because I was scared of my dreams. It'd been a long time since I'd had a good dream. My dreams weren't like before. Whenever I would talk to this being, it was basically a voice, but I could feel presence. It wasn't there anymore, it was gone. It was, my dreams were basically of me being chased, um, trying to run, but the farther I ran, the steeper the hill got, until where I was basically facing a wall and I had nowhere else to go. Where in one of my dreams, I was at my grandmother's old house, the one that her stepson had taken, and I was running all around her yard, and there was these men chasing me. And eventually, like, I would just end up going in a circle. And I would think to myself, you got to run away, you got to run away. But I just kept going around in a circle. And they started in the circle with me, but they were a lot bigger and they were a lot stronger and a lot faster. So they would catch up to me. And I don't know why, but right before they would get me, like, I would start having panic attacks. And I would think, you got to break free from the circle. You got to run somewhere else. You can't just stay in a loop. And eventually I would break out of the circle and I was able to get away, but the circle is what scared me. Running around in a circle, literally just running around, and for some reason feeling like I couldn't run nowhere else in the world but right there in that circle. And she ended up taking me to the emergency room. They would give me Xanax. They got mad because it wasn't the first time I had been there. I had a prescription for it with refills, and she wouldn't fill the prescription. They told her if that she didn't fill the prescription that they were going to call DFACS because that was neglect. I obviously needed something. I was having panic attacks, and I obviously needed some kind of medication to help me be able to be a little more stable. And she ended up getting the prescriptions filled, and then she threw them away. She threw the bottles away. She said I wasn't going to be a dope head. She was talking to someone, I don't remember who it was, but she said the judge told me that he didn't understand why I was fighting for them so much. And he said, especially her, she's going to end up, by the age of 12, if you're lucky, 14, being a prostitute and a drug addict. And he said I would never amount to anything. I've never been a prostitute. I've never been a drug addict. I've seen other people that's went through less, though, and it's really tortured them. During this time, I feel like that's whenever all the abuse had really started catching up to me, and I started losing myself. I started losing control of myself. My body started doing things. I would twitch. I was unable to sit for a while. I would constantly, my legs would jump. Or, my grandmother was all the time smacking me, like, can't you sit still? And I wouldn't be able to, like, I would just move. I tried to wear baggy clothes, thinking that it wouldn't be so obvious. It felt like my body was in control and I was just along for the ride. When I would think of something, it would just come out of my mouth. Sorry, I had somebody calling mom, mom, mom. um, it was really embarrassing for me whenever I would get in trouble for these things because it wasn't like a conscious action I was taking. And my grandmother constantly pointed it out. I think she felt like if she pointed it out, I would stop. But it wasn't like that. There would be times where I would be thinking something in my head about someone, about if they were lying about something or just something like that, then I would end up saying it out loud. And everybody would turn around and say, "What?" So it was a little embarrassing. I started trying to stay away from people a little more. When my grandmother would scream at us, I would find myself screaming out too, for no reason. The tone of her voice would just send me into a dark place sometimes. The fear of anger would rise up so quickly that I wouldn't be able to control it. Two things that have really just been a battle for me is anger and fear. And if you think about it, like, I'm pretty sure that's anyone. those two things can run you for the rest of your life. And if you don't figure out how to deal with it, it can completely control you. And you end up making terrible decisions. You end up hurting people for no reason. Whenever she would start screaming at my brother and hitting him, I would feel really, really bad. I would almost see her building up. Like she would just be sitting there and something would just kind of piss her off. And then she would literally just go find my brother, and it was almost like she went to go find her punching bag, like her release of energy. She just needed something to release it on. I wanted to stop her, but I was just so tired of fighting. Started to have rituals for everywhere I went and everything I did. That was my attempt to kind of gain some control back in my life. I felt like if I could get more control, then I wouldn't have all these crazy reactions and blurt out these things and just, have all this awkward behavior that was very noticeable. Or I felt like was very noticeable. I felt like everyone in the room knew. Um, my emotions felt like a big monster that I had to keep a leash on. I felt like I was back at home with my dad, but this time I was helpless. Um, my grandmother, she kind of caught on to my rituals, and she claimed that I was turning crazy. I didn't want to be crazy, so I picked other things that wouldn't be so obvious to everyone, like clicking my tongue on the roof of my mouth, number of like so many times, and it kind of helped in a way, because if I clicked my tongue to the roof of my mouth 4 times before I spoke, I was more conscious of what I was saying. So the rituals did have like, I'm almost thankful for them. It was just something else to overcome because I relied so deeply on them. I started seeing how my grandmother was a lot more like my dad than I thought she ever was. And I felt like maybe my brother and I were the cause, since my dad constantly said that it was us that pushed him so far. It was us that, brought all this out in him, that made him so angry, that made him want to be mean to us, that it was all our fault. So I really felt like maybe it was our fault. Maybe we are the reason why everyone around us wants to be mean to us. Around this time, I met my stepdad. His name's Mark. He was everything that I thought a dad would be, but for some reason I couldn't trust him. I didn't want to be alone with him. Um, I was really scared he was going to try to do something like my dad did. I wasn't aware yet that dads really don't do that to children. I thought that most dads did, and if I could just keep space between us, then, of course, nothing like that would happen. Or if I made sure people was always around, then nothing like that would happen. He was really good to us. He was really nice. He showed up for every birthday, every Christmas. He always had us a gift. Whether I was mad or not, no matter what I was going through, he was always supportive. He always listened. I thought eventually that his kindness and stuff would run out. And I was just kind of waiting there to see, when is this man going to slip up and show me who he really is. I'm going to leave it here because we're almost at 20 minutes. And I made my son go jump with his little sister so I could do this video. So I hope y'all have a good day. We're almost halfway through this, so hopefully it won't take too long. See y'all next time. Bye.